Imagine a summer in America before air conditioning. It's the late 1800s, and the heat is relentless. The air is thick, sticky, and unshakable. There are no fans humming in the background, no icy drinks pulled from refrigerators, just sweat and desperation. Yet Americans didn't simply sit and suffer. They invented, improvised, and endured, coming up with dozens of ways to survive summers that would drive most of us today to the brink, with some of their tricks being quite clever. Others were strange, and a few of them might surprise you with how effective they still are. So let's count down 30 ways people kept cool in the heat before air conditioning in America. Number 1, the hand fan. Long before electricity, this was the simplest and most universal solution. In churches, businesses, and homes across the country, fans weren't just tools, they were cultural icons. Southern church services were famous for paper fans decorated with Bible verses or advertisements from local businesses. Picture it, you'd see them fluttering in unison during long sermons, turning pews into a sea of swaying paper. In homes, women carried folding fans as part of their daily dress, not just as a fashion accessory, but as a true survival tool. Even children were handed fans on stifling nights, each one responsible for creating their own breeze. It was cheap, it was personal, and it was everywhere. And while one small fan might not cool an entire room, it gave people a sense of control over the heat, something that mattered almost as much as the breeze itself. But when the air outside was just as suffocating as the air inside, Americans had to get creative in bigger ways. That's when daily habits and lifestyle hacks became the second line of defense against the summer heat. Number 2, sleeping outside. Right when the summer heat made homes unbearable, people simply abandoned them at night. In New York City, families carried mattresses up narrow staircases and slept on rooftops, hoping to catch even the faintest breeze. Fire escapes doubled as makeshift bedrooms, with parents and children huddled on thin blankets draped over iron steps. Parks often looked like open-air campsites, hundreds of people stretched out on benches or directly on the grass. Newspapers from the late 1800s describe how entire families, dressed in night clothes, would haul pillows out to public spaces because it was cooler than suffocating inside. Police sometimes tried to shoo people away, but on the hottest nights they turned a blind eye, recognizing that survival mattered more than order. 4 working-class families crammed into tenements with no ventilation. Sleeping outdoors wasn't an adventure. It was the only way to make it through the night. Number 3, window strategy. Americans became experts in controlling airflow. At night, windows were thrown wide open, pulling cooler air into the home. By sunrise, windows were slammed shut, and heavy blinds or thick curtains were drawn tight to trap whatever relief the night had offered. This simple trick of timing gave families a fighting chance to hold on to cooler air for a few extra hours. In row houses, people used transom windows, small windows above doors that could tilt open to let cross breezes pass through hallways. In some regions, shutters were essential, keeping out the sun's brutal rays while still allowing drafts to circulate. It was a low-tech science, passed down by habit. Open everything wide at night, seal it all at daybreak, and pray the air would last until sunset. Number 4, damp cloth tricks. Before mechanical cooling, people turned to water. One of the most common methods was soaking sheets, blankets, or even clothing in water, and then draping them over beds, chairs, or bodies. As the water evaporated, it cooled the skin and the surrounding air, a natural form of evaporative cooling. Some called this the Egyptian method, but it was embraced in America too, especially in farmhouses and frontier towns. People also dipped handkerchiefs in well water and pressed them against their necks, wrists, or foreheads to cool down. On the hottest nights, parents wet their children's pajamas so they could sleep without tossing in misery. It wasn't glamorous. Floors often ended up damp, and bed sheets smelled musty by morning, but for many, it was the only relief they had. Number 5, public water relief. Cities became playgrounds of water in the summer. Children splashed in public fountains, dunked themselves in horse troughs, or chased the spray of open hydrants. By the early 20th century, hydrants were unofficially cracked open on hot days, sending streams of water down entire blocks. Kids turned the gush into makeshift water slides, while adults filled buckets and soaked their clothes. In working-class neighborhoods, the fire hydrant was more than mischief, it was community air conditioning. Newspapers often reported on these hydrant parties, sometimes scolding them. But everyone knew they were a lifeline during brutal heat waves. For people without country homes or lakes to escape to, the water flowing through city streets was their ocean. Number 6. Midnight swims. Across America, rivers, ponds, and lakes were the natural refuge. In New England, families walked to mill ponds or public swimming holes at night. Along the Mississippi, kids leaped from docks into the dark river to cool down. In small towns, groups would gather at quarry lakes or creeks, the moon reflecting off the water as laughter carried into the night. These swims weren't always safe. Drownings were tragically common, but they were part of the rhythm of American summers. Even city dwellers found ways, sneaking into public fountains or waterfront piers after hours. For many Americans, midnight swims blurred the line between necessity and joy, a moment where survival turned into summer memory. Number 7. Cold drinks and porch rituals. Drinking something cold became as much a ritual as a relief. Lemonade stands sprouted on street corners, not just as a way for kids to make money, but because neighbors desperately needed refreshment. Sweet tea brewed strong, poured over ice, became a southern staple in the 19th century, spreading across the country. Beer cooled in buckets of ice water was common on porches, where men gathered after long workdays to swap stories and sip slowly. For middle-class families, shaded porches became social centers. Neighbors fanning themselves, sipping from shared pitchers, and watching the street go by. In cities, some people even rode elevated trains or streetcars, simply to feel the breeze through open windows, treating the ride itself like a moving fan. These rituals weren't luxuries, they were survival methods, dressed up as tradition. These habits gave Americans day-to-day survival tactics. But beating the heat wasn't just about behavior. It was built into the very homes and cities around them. Number 8. Porches and verandas. Before air conditioning, porches weren't just decoration, they were lifelines. In the South, wide wraparound verandas provided a shaded space where families could escape the suffocating heat inside their homes. People brought chairs, rocking benches, even hammocks outside to sit for hours, fanning themselves while catching passing breezes. These porches were often raised above the ground, allowing cooler air to circulate underneath and around the house. It wasn't just functional, it shaped culture. Summer evenings meant neighbors gathering on each other's porches, swapping stories, playing music, and drinking sweet tea. The porch became a social stage, but its purpose was survival. Inside could feel like an oven, while outside, with shade and airflow, you had a fighting chance. Number 9. Awnings. Canvas awnings stretched over windows and storefronts were a common sight across American cities. They weren't just for looks, they blocked direct sunlight and kept interiors several degrees cooler. Merchants depended on them to protect both goods and customers from the oppressive glare of the summer sun. Even the White House in Washington was fitted with heavy awnings in the 19th century to keep presidential offices tolerable during humid summers. Families often rolled them out in the morning and pulled them back at night, creating a daily rhythm of defense against the sun. Before modern insulation and reflective glass, awnings were one of the simplest but most effective shields against summer heat. Number 10. Shutters and blinds. In an era before blackout curtains, shutters and blinds were essential. Wooden shutters, painted light colors to reflect the sun, were shut tight during the day to keep rooms cool and dim. Venetian blinds, popularized in the 18th century and widespread by the 19th, gave Americans more control, allowing just enough slivers of light to peek through, while keeping most of the heat out. In farmhouses, shutters were thick and heavy, often paired with curtains to create layers of defense. The goal was simple: keep the brutal summer sun out as long as possible. This wasn't just comfort, it was protection for food, furniture, and even people's health. Number 11. High ceilings. Walk into a southern home built before 1900, and you'll often find ceilings soaring 10 to 12 feet high. This wasn't a stylistic choice, it was science, even if they didn't call it that. Hot air rises, leaving the cooler air closer to the ground where people lived and worked. Families often set up chairs, sleeping mats, or even cots on the lowest level of the house to take advantage of that natural separation. In some cases, entire summer kitchens were built in basements, both to avoid heating the house with cooking and to take advantage of the cooler underground air. High ceilings combined with tall windows turned homes into giant heat traps above and breezy shelters below. Number 12. Cross ventilation. Houses weren't just built to look pretty, they were designed to breathe. Builders aligned windows and doors across from each other so air could flow straight through, flushing out hot, stagnant air. In crowded cities, transom windows above doors played a similar role, tilting open to catch breezes that slipped down hallways. Row houses in Philadelphia and Baltimore often had narrow alleyways or rear courtyards specifically to create airflow between buildings. In warm climates, homes were designed with multiple entrances, each positioned to invite wind. This wasn't accidental, it was deliberate design, ensuring that even in stifling summers, air never stood still inside for too long. Number 13. Early cooling tubes. Some Americans went beyond passive cooling and experimented with early technology. At the Lyndhurst Mansion in New York during the 1860s, engineers built hollow wall tubes that funneled naturally cooler basement air upstairs. Wealthy families across the Northeast played with similar ideas, directing air through stone channels or vents to keep living spaces more comfortable. It was a primitive form of central air, powered only by temperature differences. While these systems weren't common, they show how far some people were willing to go to find relief from oppressive heat, even before electricity made true air conditioning possible. Number 14. Shade trees. Nature was the cheapest and most beautiful form of cooling. Families planted tall oaks, elms, and maples on the west and south sides of their homes to block the hottest sun of the day. Entire streets were lined with trees, transforming city blocks into shaded tunnels that felt dramatically cooler than bare avenues nearby. These tree canopies didn't just help houses, they made communities more livable. Sitting under a tree in the yard or town square was often the only real escape from the afternoon sun. By the mid-19th century, some cities even had organized tree planting programs. Recognizing that a shaded street wasn't just pretty, it was essential for survival during brutal summers. These design tricks shaped how Americans built and lived in their homes. But one of the most powerful tools against the heat wasn't wood or canvas, it was ice. Number 15. Ice harvesting in the 19th century. America's winters fueled its summers. Before refrigeration, entire industries revolved around cutting massive blocks of ice from frozen lakes and rivers. In New England, workers carved thick slabs from the surface of ponds, hauling them with horse-drawn sleds to giant ice houses insulated with sawdust. From there, trains and ships carried ice across the country, and even across the ocean. By the 1850s, New York City alone was consuming over 100,000 tons of harvested ice every year. Without it, summer in the city would have been unbearable. The ice trade was so big, it shaped economies and transformed what people thought was possible in the heat. Number 16. The icebox. Every household that could afford one relied on the icebox. These wooden cabinets looked like small cupboards, but inside blocks of ice-chilled shelves of food and drinks. Iceboxes kept milk from spoiling, butter from melting, and leftovers edible for days. Children often snuck slivers of ice from the box, sucking on them like candy during sweltering afternoons. The icebox wasn't just an appliance, it was a symbol of modern comfort in an age when beating the heat was a daily struggle. For many families, it was the single most important piece of furniture in the kitchen. Number 17. Ice deliveries. Summers in American cities came with a familiar sound: the clatter of the ice wagon. Delivery men hauled massive blocks of ice from horse-drawn carts into kitchens, chopping them down to fit into each family's icebox. Kids followed close behind, begging for shards of ice that fell to the street. For working-class neighborhoods, the ice wagon was more than a delivery, it was an event. A daily reminder that cool relief was within reach. This ritual became so ingrained that many children of the early 1900s described the Iceman. It's a figure just as memorable as the milkman. Number 18. Iced drinks. Americans quickly developed a taste for cold drinks. Lemonade poured over chipped ice, sweet tea chilled in pitchers, and soda water served in drugstores all became summer staples. By the late 19th century, iced beverages weren't just refreshments, they were cultural markers. Hosting guests with a glass of lemonade over ice showed not only hospitality but also status, since ice itself wasn't cheap. In the South, sweet tea iced to perfection, became a tradition that defined summer, while taverns in the north proudly served beer cooled in buckets of ice water. Cold drinks were more than thirst quenchers. They were survival rituals. Number 19, ice cream. Perhaps the sweetest way to beat the heat was ice cream. Long before Baskin-Robbins or Haagen-Dazs, Americans churned ice cream at home using salt and ice to freeze the mixture. Families gathered around hand-cranked churns, taking turns spinning the handle until a creamy dessert formed. By the mid-1800s, ice cream parlors popped up in cities, offering chilled treats to customers who could afford them. Community ice cream socials became beloved summer events, where neighbors gathered not just for dessert, but for a brief escape from the sweltering air. For children, that first cold bite was pure magic proof that even in the hottest summer, joy could be frozen. Number 20. Ice houses and community storage. Beyond home ice boxes, communities built massive ice houses. These structures stored tons of ice harvested in winter, packed tight with sawdust for insulation. Farmers relied on them to preserve milk and butter. Taverns kept barrels chilled inside, and butchers used them to keep meat fresh through the hottest months. In rural towns, the ice house was as essential as the general store. It kept entire communities fed and healthy. Some of these ice houses were so well built that remnants still stand today. Monuments to a time when frozen water carved from lakes kept America cool. Ice didn't just cool drinks, it reshaped entire summers. But as cars, trains, and new inventions entered American life, cooling followed people wherever they went. Number 21. Handheld fans. Even as America industrialized, one of the most reliable cooling tools remained the simplest: the handheld fan. In the South, paper church fans were handed out for free, often printed with Bible verses or advertisements from local businesses. During long Sunday sermons in sweltering wooden chapels, entire congregations moved in rhythm, hundreds of fans fluttering like wings against the heat. Folding fans were also popular accessories, carried by women as both fashion statements and survival gear during summer outings. They were inexpensive, personal, and universally understood. If you had a fan in your hand, you were at least fighting back against the suffocating air. For many Americans, the fan wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of dignity in the face of relentless summer heat. Number 22. Car window coolers. By the 1930s and 1940s, automobiles had transformed American life. But they didn't have air conditioning, so drivers invented their own solutions. One of the most ingenious was the car window evaporative cooler, often called a swamp cooler. These strange-looking metal canisters clipped to a car's window and used the wind itself to create chilled air. As the car moved, outside air was forced through the cooler, where it passed over water-soaked pads. The evaporating water dropped the temperature of the airflow, sending a refreshing breeze into the cabin. For families driving across scorching desert highways or southern backroads, these coolers were lifesavers. They looked odd, but they worked well enough to make long summer road trips possible, before factory-installed air conditioning became the standard. Number 23. Damp towels and kerchiefs. Not every family could afford fancy gadgets. For many, cooling on the go meant nothing more than a wet cloth. Travelers on trains or trolleys carried handkerchiefs dipped in water from station pumps, pressing them against their necks or foreheads to ward off dizziness in the heat. On farms, workers soaked towels in well water and draped them around their shoulders while laboring in the fields. Children often wrapped wet cloths around chunks of ice, creating makeshift ice packs that dripped steadily as they melted. It wasn't glamorous, it was messy, soggy, and temporary. But for ordinary people, it was one of the cheapest and most immediate ways to cool down in the blazing American summer. Number 24. Portable ice containers. Picnics and summer outings led to another American invention: the portable ice chest. Before today's plastic coolers, families used heavy wooden or metal boxes lined with tin or zinc, packed with sawdust and ice. These chests kept sandwiches, fruit, and lemonade refreshingly cold during long afternoons at the park or seaside. They were bulky, but they worked, and they became a fixture of games: 4th of July gatherings, Sunday picnics, and baseball games. In an age before vending machines and convenience stores, the portable ice chest was freedom. It allowed families to carry a little pocket of winter with them, no matter how hot the day became. These portable hacks showed that cooling wasn't just for the home, it followed people on the move. But perhaps the most powerful cooling strategies were shared by entire communities, shaping how Americans gathered during the hottest months. Number 25. Sleeping in parks. In the days before air conditioning, public parks became open-air dormitories. On sweltering nights in cities like New York and Chicago, families carried pillows, sheets, and sometimes even mattresses into parks. Central Park was often dotted with bodies stretched across the grass, everyone desperate for a hint of night breeze. Benches filled quickly, and sidewalks outside shaded buildings became impromptu sleeping quarters. For working-class families packed into tenements with no ventilation, this wasn't recreation, it was survival. Newspapers frequently reported on these mass migrations to public spaces, describing entire blocks of people dozing under the stars. It was a sight unique to the pre-air conditioning era. Parks that by day offered leisure, by night became life-saving shelters. Number 26. Breezy streetcars and elevated trains. Public transit wasn't just for travel, it was air conditioning on wheels. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, many city dwellers paid the nickel fare at night just to ride elevated trains or open-air streetcars. With all the windows flung open, the constant breeze felt like a moving fan. Some people circled the city for hours, not caring where the ride ended, only that the air moved. Streetcar companies even advertised their open-air cars as summer specials, knowing the relief they provided. For the price of a fare, passengers escaped the stagnant heat of cramped apartments, trading it for wind in their faces and the rhythmic clatter of rails. Number 27. Public fountains and bathhouses. American cities invested in fountains not just for beauty but for survival. Children played in ornate marble fountains in town squares, while adults splashed their faces and soaked their hats. In immigrant neighborhoods, public bathhouses became essential, offering cold water plunges to families without private plumbing. A bathhouse visit wasn't a luxury, it was often the only chance for true relief. By the early 20th century, municipal pools began to appear, expanding the idea of public cooling into full recreation, whether it was a stone fountain in a park or a row of showers in a bathhouse. These spaces gave city dwellers the only real break from relentless urban heat. Number 28. Church and community fans. Churches, theaters, and auditoriums had their own form of cooling. The paper fan. Congregations waved them in unison during long summer sermons, the fluttering almost as loud as the preaching itself. The fans often carried advertisements from funeral homes, grocers, or local businesses, an early form of sponsored relief. Movie theaters, long before they could afford air conditioning, offered these fans to keep audiences comfortable during summer screenings. They were cheap, they worked, and they became cultural icons of the American South in particular. The church fan was more than paper on a stick. It was survival in a society where Sunday mornings could feel hotter than the rest of the week combined. Number 29. Community ice socials. Ice cream wasn't just dessert, it was an event. Communities held ice cream socials, church picnics, and fairs centered on cold treats and shaded gathering spaces. These events were both celebration and survival, drawing people out of their stifling homes into breezier communal areas. A churn of ice cream, or a barrel of iced lemonade, could bring an entire town together. For rural America, the ice social was one of the few times when neighbors could share both relief and fellowship. Cooling down became not just a necessity, but a tradition, one that shaped memories of summer for generations. Number 30. Escaping to the shore or mountains. For wealthier Americans, the ultimate solution to summer heat was escape. Families in New York fled to breezy resorts along the Jersey Shore or the Catskills. Bostonians retreated to Cape Cod. Southerners who could afford it headed for the mountains of North Carolina or Virginia. Entire resort towns were built on this seasonal migration, their economies fueled by city dwellers desperate for relief. Boarding houses, seaside cottages, and grand hotels filled each summer, packed with families escaping stifling city heat. While the wealthy retreated to the shore, the poor had to make do with parks and hydrants. But the cultural divide showed just how powerful the need for cooling was. Those with means simply left the heat behind. From hand fans fluttering in church pews, to families stretched across park lawns, Americans discovered 30 different ways to beat the heat before air conditioning ever existed. Some were clever, some were desperate, and a few became cherished traditions that still survive today. Some were clever, some were desperate, and a few became cherished traditions that still survive today. What these stories reveal is resilience, the creativity of people who refuse to surrender to the summer sun. But here's the question: if air conditioning disappeared tomorrow, which of these old-school methods would you try first? Would you haul your mattress out to the porch, dunk yourself in a fountain, or maybe churn your own ice cream? Tell me in the comments, I'd love to hear your answer. And if you enjoyed this journey into America's past, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Retro America, and share your own favorite cooling hacks below. Your support is always appreciated. It helps us keep bringing you the fascinating stories of how America lived, worked, and survived.